No one yet? Oh, here we go. Okay, hi everybody. We're just going to give everyone about a minute or two to join up. Thanks for joining us. Coming up exactly 4 o'clock. Give everyone 1 minute or so before we'll get started. All right, let's see if Veronica Lee's on there. Hello, Veronica. Veronica works at McGraw-Hill. All right, what do you say? Should we get started? I lost my clock, so. All right, we got a couple more. That we're looking good. Thanks, everybody. Can you pop to the first slide, please, Debbie? Okay. All right, hi, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us today. This is our AP Computer Science A webinar from the 5 Steps to a 5 team. Just before I hand it over to the host, the author of our book, I wanted to get a couple of quick housekeeping items out of the way. If you can see, everyone can see my screen before we begin. A couple of quick things. Note up top, I just wanted to make sure we sent this notification out to the AP educators that we know, but this is going to be primarily a student-focused review. So please feel free to, I know you probably invited some of your students for today, but we will have a recording that you can share with your students. We're glad to have the AP Computer Science A community here with us, but it is going to be, just so you know, focused toward helping students succeed on the exam. If you would please feel free to ask questions throughout the session. We're going to ask you to look at the bottom of your screen, that Q&A feature. If you could limit your questions to that Q&A feature at the bottom, that's going to make everything easier. We will have the chat feature live, I believe, but we're hoping not to have to monitor that too much. If you go into the Q&A feature and you see that somebody's already asked the question that you have, please give it a quick thumbs up, and that'll make us, it'll make it clear to us that for the end, that we can see, you know, a lot of people had that same question, that we will give that question at the end more emphasis. Quick notes on the setup of the webinar. Nobody on the webinar, none of the participants are going to be able to see or hear one another for privacy issues, privacy reasons, but you should be able to hear all of us, all 4 panelists, and that should be fine. I'm going to do a quick intro. I want to make sure that everybody knows, all the educators on the line. If there are students on the line, it's important we reiterate here, no student data is being collected. No email addresses, no data, no faces, no names. So we're good with that in case anyone had those concerns. Quick note that it's going to be, we plan this whole interactive webinar to be interactive. So please do participate, answer the polls as we go through. We're going to go through a number of questions. Please feel free to participate with those. It's going to make it more interactive, more fun. And the last thing is a repeat of what I've already said. The session is being recorded. You will be able to access the recording, share it with your students, share it with whomever you like. As of tomorrow, I believe, right, Simone? And that's the link. You guys can hear me?
Correct. Tomorrow morning.
Okay, and there's the link. Two other quick housekeeping things I didn't put in writing, and that's number one is please be appropriate. We're not prepared at all to start policing people in their comments or anything like that. So we would hope that everyone would not would be good in that respect. And probably most importantly is an admission. We're really excited about these webinars. This is our very first one. This is the first one we're doing. So I hope you'll be patient with us. Bear with us if there's any awkward moments, as there are bound to be, but we're excited about these. We welcome you. And I'm going to turn it over to Debbie Klipp. Debbie is our author and AP Computer Science A exam expert. Debbie, over to you.
You're pushing it with expert, but okay.
No.
So this is the agenda. This is what we're going to be going through today, talking about the subject of computer science and what is going to be on the exam. Some reader notes. So the free response questions are graded by teachers and college professors. They're called readers. So the chief reader puts out some reader notes every year about things that have been observed in answering the questions, the free response questions. So I'm going to be going over some of those points to look out for and give you some encouragement what to look for. I'll definitely talk about topics that we have to review because the exam is in just a few weeks. We're going to look at the book, some of the practice problems that are in the book in the diagnostic exam specifically. There are also practice exams that are in the book, but I did not want to go over any of the items in there in case the teachers wanted to assign their students some of those questions. I didn't want them to be already discussed here. If you don't have the book, that is fine. I'm going to be putting up the questions on the screen anyway. And then the question and answer period. So as Mr. O'Sullivan said, my name is Debbie Klipp. I've been a computer science teacher, teaching computer science A since 1989, which dates me quite a bit. I've been a reader of the exam since 1999 when the language used was C++. I've also been a table leader, which is one of the people that trains the readers at a table. There's 8 of them. And I've also been a question leader where I've trained all of the, been a part of the training of the readers in the exam. And because of that, I've also worked with ETS and they've asked me to write some questions for the AP Computer Science A exam, as well as the practice exam, which is what the teachers take to get certified. And I'm also a College Board consultant. So I do summer workshops, one-day workshops throughout. And I've also presented at some conferences. But I'm most proud of right now the being a co-author of the 5 Steps to a 5 book. I just recently came into this position 2 years ago. So computer science started back in 1984. It is one of the fairly recent exams that College Board provides for AP. In 1984, that language of the time was Pascal. In 1999, it changed to C++, and in 2004, it changed to Java. The reason it changes is because the Computer Science 1 courses at colleges and universities were changing their intro course to a given language, so therefore College Board keeps up with that. And since 2004, it has been in the language of Java, and it will continue to be in Java for the foreseeable future. In 2009, a few years ago, College Board released a course and exam description, which told us, the teachers, as well as you, the students, what type of topics to expect on the exam in more detail. Before 2019, we were kind of trying to guess what would be given as a free response question 1, 2, 3, 4. But now since 2019, they are telling us exactly what types of questions to expect for free response questions 1, 2, 3, 4. Through all of those changes, it is our job as educators to teach computer science, not just programming. So just because the language has changed over the years, we're still teaching computer science. And also it is our goal as educators for you students to gain enough knowledge in this content so that you can get college credit and skip that first course, that first computer science course. So here are some of the notes that I want to go through in terms of the reading, some of the free response questions. So the exam, you probably all know by now that the exam is based on multiple choice and free response questions. There's 40 multiple choice questions with answer choices A, B, C, D, E. Computer science, I believe, was one of the few exams that still has 5 answer choices. Some of the other exams are only having 4 answer choices, but computer science still has the 5. 90 minutes to answer the multiple choice questions. Out of the 40 questions, each question is worth 1 point. So you could have a maximum of 40 points on the multiple choice questions, and that gives you 50% of your score. The other part of the exam, 50% of your grade, comes from the free response questions. You have, again, 90 minutes to answer those 4 free response questions. They are worth 9 points each. 9 times 4 is 36 points, but so that the 2 parts can be equally weighted, ETS takes the free response scores, multiplies it by 1.11111 to get the 40 points. So 40 points for multiple choice, 40 points for free response. And you might know if you're taking other AP subjects that their weighting is different. It might be different. It's not all the same. Back in 2015, they released what the cut points were in order to get a 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So back in 2015, out of the 80 points that is possible to get, if a student scored anywhere between 31 and 43 points between the multiple choice free response added together, they earned a score of a 3. If they got 44 to 61, they had a 4, and 62 and above was a 5. Out of all the students that took the exam in 2015, 64% of them earned a score of 3 or above, which is satisfactory, which is the minimum at which most colleges will take credit. When you take those points, if you earn 30 points out of a maximum of 80, that means you only have to earn 38.75% of the points to get the 3. To get the 4, you would have had to have earned 55% of the points, and to earn a 5, you had to get 77% of the points. But again, this is back in the 2015. Not every year, they don't release what those cut points are every year. I would take a guess to say they're approximately the same, but it's no way ensuring that if you get 31 points in 2022, that you will get a 3. It's just a basic idea. Last year's group of students, there were about 65% of students that scored the 3 or above. So that's about the breakdown of the computer science A. So I'm hoping to give you some of the knowledge so that you can not get that 3, not get that 4, but get that 5. Every little bit helps, right?
Right.
All right, so I'm going to look at the 2 free response questions that are in the diagnostic exam in the book. I'm going to look at problem number 1, which is an example of a free response question type 2, which is the class design. And then I'm also going to look at question number 2 in the diagnostic exam, which is a sample of a 2-dimensional array question, which would be free response question 4. So this is question number 1. So if you have your book with you, or if you're watching this as a recording and you can go and get your book, if you have the book, take a look at page 38, question number 1. I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm going to give you 10 minutes to take a look at it, digest it, see what the question is asking, and if you have time to try to answer it. So I'll give you 10 minutes. Set my timer here.
Maybe we should have put some Muzak in here or something.
Yeah, no, they're concentrating. They don't need
That's
music.
right. Sorry, no distractions.
I'm gonna put them.
Debbie, I know I don't want to interrupt anyone's concentration, but maybe we can ask people to raise their hand if they finish. If we get everyone in under 10 minutes, maybe we don't have to wait. But listen, I know it's a tough subject. So
No, 10 minutes is forever. It seems like
it
when you're not
seems
doing
like a lot of
anything.
dead air. It's a lot of dead air. But I know we're working hard. So
Yeah.
if you guys want to hit your raise hand icon, if you don't need any more time, maybe if everybody, maybe we can cut it a little bit short. All right, Denise, love it. I don't see any hands raised, so I guess it's everyone's working.
So 2 more minutes, and then we'll discuss it. All right, that was 10 minutes, which in by no means is enough time to complete this task. So there's 4 questions on the free response section. If you take 90 minutes and you divide it by the 4 questions, you have about 22 and a half minutes. So I didn't even give you half of that time because all I want to do is just talk about different strategies for some of the free response questions. All right, so in this particular question, this is a typical class design question. A typical question you might see as item number 2. So how it's set up, it gives some explanation of the class, then it gives us some examples, and then at the bottom, it happens to give us exactly what it is that we need to do. So if you look at some of the key phrases, write the complex number class. So you're doing a complete class. Your implementation must include a constructor. So you need to make sure that you include a constructor in your solution that has 2 double parameters that represent A and B in that order, and a default constructor. So you have a second constructor that you need to create. It also has to have a method called add, which calculates and returns the sum of 2 complex numbers represented by its 2 parameters, and a toString method that will return a string representing the complex number. So what I've done, I can click on it, is I've highlighted some of the key things. So when you do your solution, so you read your problem through, you go ahead and you start writing your solution. As you're writing it, or when you're finished, at the very least, you want to go back and reread the question and make sure that you included everything that was asked of you. So it's a complete class. You have the constructor, you have the second constructor, you've got your 2 methods. So you want to make sure that you have all of those, and all of those align with the samples that they gave you. So here you can see it's a complex number. Here's the 2 parameters. Here's the other constructor, the 2 parameters. Here's the other constructor, no parameters. That's why it's called the default constructor. Here it's calling the method add, taking the 2 parameters and putting it back into a complex number. So you want to make sure that when you're writing that code, that you take a look at all of those pieces and that you have answered all of those pieces. So here is the solution. Whoop. There you go. Here is the solution. I know it's a little bit small, so I apologize for that. Public class, it gave you the name of the class. You have to make sure that you name your class exactly what they told you. You declare your private instance variables. In this case, they're of type double. Here is your first constructor taking the 2 parameters, and they do their assignments. They're taking the parameters and they're initializing the instance variables to those parameters. Here's your default constructor. There's no parameters, so therefore you create the values that it should start out as, which typically would be 0. And then here's the add method. The add method takes the 2 parameters. Both of those parameters have to also be a complex number, and you're going to add them. And it explained to you how you add complex numbers. You take the 2 real parts, you add them together. You take the 2 complex parts, you add them together. So what I've done as the solution is I created 2 private methods that will return the real part and the imaginary part. And then here is the toString method, where it returns the parentheses, the value of the real, the plus symbol, the value of the imaginary, and then the I with the parentheses. So here are the things, here's the big takeaway from the class design question, to make sure that you have in every class design question. These are pretty much the things that you can count on that the readers will be looking for. These are the criteria that are based how those 9 points get earned. So the class header, you want to make sure that your class header uses the word public, class, and whatever the name of the class is. If it happens to be something that is inherited, then you would say the public class, the name of the class, using the keyword extends and whatever that other class name is. Now we know that we don't have to put the word private, we don't have to put the modifier public there. We can leave the public off and it'll be perfectly fine. The instance variables in most cases, or I can think of probably every case, our class would probably have or will have instance variables. You want to make sure that your instance variables, that you declare them to be private. Yes, they are. You can have them as public. That will work perfectly fine in the Java world. But for the AP exam, we want to make sure that our instance variables are private. If you don't have them declared as private, you will not earn the point. Or at least in the past, you have not earned the point. I don't know what it will look like on the 2022 exam because it hasn't happened, and then in the future. But I would highly expect that the instance variables must be private. And if you don't have them private, you would most likely get a penalty. So just make them private. Your constructor, if your class design specifically asked for a constructor to be written, then make the constructor. Not all class designs need a constructor written, but I'm pretty sure that in most of the questions that we're going to see on the AP exam, that they'll be asking us to write a constructor. Maybe not necessarily a default constructor, but at least one constructor. Here, when you do your constructor, you need to make sure that you have it as public. Do not make the mistake of making your constructor private, because if you do, that means you can't instantiate the object and an object outside of the class. And the whole point of creating this class is so that you can instantiate objects. So make sure your constructors are public. And again, you can leave that keyword off. Just don't do private. The purpose of the constructor mainly is to take those instance variables and give those the main purpose of the constructor is to take those parameters and give the values of those parameters to the instance variables. So make sure that you do that assignment. In a constructor, there is no return type. So don't write the word return and then something else, because you will most likely get penalized. The method headers, the methods will be given to you. Make sure you write the headers properly. Again, they're probably going to be public unless you're making one yourself, then it would be private. Give the return type, whether it's an int, a string, a double, a Boolean, or nothing at all, a void. Make sure you have the return type. The name of the method, make sure that you've used the correct name of the method that you were given in the example. And then if it has any parameters, this is where you would put them in. Make sure you use the appropriate number of parameters and the appropriate type of parameters. So for example, here, these parameters for our add method, I had 2 of them. They were both of the complex number class. So I need to make sure that when I create my own method, that I'm having those as parameters also. Those methods should likely be public, not private. Again, this is not a common example. Here, I just chose to declare my methods to be private so I could get to those values. If my method returns something like that add did, make sure that I have a return type that is compatible to what they gave me in the problem. Local variables, you want to make sure that if you use local variables in your methods, that you declare them as int or string or whatever their type is. And then in most cases, you probably want to initialize them to the empty string or 0 or some value. But you want to make sure that you declare them and use them if you have them in your methods.
Debbie, I'm sorry, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? I see that Kelly Powers is asking a question. She's asking, do you have to code the accessors? The directions did not direct you to do so. Should students understand to do that even when not instructed?
No, that's a good question. So no, I would not, unless you're going to use it in your own code. in what you're writing for the methods that were required, I would not take the time to write any accessor methods or mutator methods, any getters and setters, because they, to be honest, will not be looked at. If your code does not call any of those methods, if you throw in some methods and they're not called, the readers will not even look at those at all. So don't waste your, I don't want to say waste your time, but don't take the time to write anything that is not asked of you, which is the next point with the two-string method. Here, this particular problem needed us to write the two-string method. So that's why I did it. But in most other cases, you wouldn't do that. So don't do anything extra, because if you do call it and something bad happens, you're going to get penalized. But if you don't call it at all and you have it there unnecessarily, the readers will not look at it. The parameters, if parameters are required, make sure that you include their types in the header. If it's an int, if it's a double, if it's a Boolean, or what have you. And the last point goes to what Kelly had asked. Only write the methods that are required in the problem description. Don't do extra that aren't needed. Here, I did the extra, the private, the get real and the get imaginary, because I needed them in my solution. But if they're not needed in your solution, don't take the time to do that.
Debbie, there's one more question from an anonymous. Why are the getter methods private?
These particular methods are private because only me in the class design, I'm designing this class, I'm the only one that can use it. That's what private means. If I was in my main program, if I go back to this, let's say this is a main program, if I were to say x1.getReal, I would have a compiler error because there is no getReal method that I have access to in my main program, because I declared it to be private. If it were public, I could do that. But because I declared it private, I couldn't do that.
Thanks. I see Kelly. Kelly had a couple of earlier questions. They might be referring to the book, though. So let's come back to those. We can move on.
Okay.
Thank you, Debbie.
All right, so that's the class design question. So question number 2 is going to be class design. We're always going to see that, well, until something changes, which I don't see that has not been any announcement of any changes. So question number 2 will always be a class design question, and it will be designing things from class design is unit 5, anything from units 1, 2, 3, 4. So in this class design question, I wouldn't expect, or I wouldn't, I'm 99% sure that I would not see an array or an array list or a 2D component in the class design question. It'll just be nice, simple, making the headers, returning, doing some calculations with conditionals and Booleans and loops and things like that. Nothing with that would have access to arrays, array lists, or 2D arrays. Okay.
There's one or two other questions. I think, yeah, I think I said, but I think they probably are helpful to people as we go through. Rebecca's asking, were the accessories necessary here since you needed an A and B of other complex number objects? And then there was something in the chat as well. I don't know if we want to move on. Yeah,
it's just the design decision that was made to make these complex numbers. In order for me to be able to print the real and the imaginary part, I had to create methods myself, and I declared to be private. I wouldn't do them public because the main program doesn't want to have access to them. So they were necessary for my solution, Rebecca, or someone from Rebecca Fixture's class. So, okay. So these are great questions that you can follow up with your teacher, right? As well as go into the, in the AP classroom, there's AP videos. When you look at some of the things from Unit 5, you will also get some other teachers take on how the class is designed. So great questions to move forward with your class, as well as, for the teachers. All right, let's take a look at the next question. Oh, and I wanted to highlight right here, the instance variables, private. Make sure they're private. Don't have them public. Otherwise, out of the 9 points, you will lose 1 point. Likewise with the constructor, make sure it is public, or you don't make it anything at all. Just leave off public because it will default to be public. But if you put a private in front of your constructor, almost guaranteed to lose a point. Same thing with the methods. The methods that they were given to you in that description must be public. Only the ones that I've created for myself to get this working need to be private. So some of those things hopefully will save you some penalty points, or make sure that you don't do that so you don't get any of the penalty points. So you're on your way to getting that 5. All right, this is number 2 in the book. It is on page 39. It's like 4 pages worth of the question. So I'm trying to squeeze it in so you can read it. So here is the first part of the description. Here is the second part of the description. So I'll give you some time to take a look at that. But the next page, you can see right here, you're going to, in this class, you're going to write this part in part A, this section for part B, and this section for part C. So I'll give you about 7 minutes to take a look at this page. Unless you have your book, you can go through and look at it nicely, but I'll give you, let's say, 5 minutes to look at this page, and then I'll go to the next page, which will put up exactly what question A, B, and C are. So here's the awkward silence for 5 minutes. If you're watching a recording, go ahead, pause it, just take 22.5 minutes, answer the question, and then come back. But if you're here now, I'm just going to give you just a few minutes to take a look at it. 5 minutes for this page, and then I'm going to scroll and go to the next page for the next 5 minutes. So it's that awkward time. Set my timer. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next page a minute early, just looking at the time. Notice in here that in this class, public class coin collector tools, that there's a private instance variable called coin box. That is a two-dimensional array. So that right there tells you that in writing your solution to part A, B, and C, or one or out of three of them, or two out of three of them, all three of them, that in writing your solution, that you will use this instance variable, coin box. Make sure you call it coin box. So here is part A, B, and C. So I'll give you 4 minutes to take a look at it, just looking at the time. Because again, this is not meant to have you do the question in full. It's me to give you some tips about the exam. So I'll give you 4 minutes. All right, again, not enough time to completely do the questions because you have 22.5 minutes to answer it on the AP exam, but I just wanted to show you some, just wanted to bring up some important features. So here you can see, going back, here is a coin class. It has private instance variables, it has a constructor, it has the accessor methods, and then here we are in a class ourselves called coin collection tools. I have a private instance variable called coin box that I'm probably going to use throughout, and it says that I have to do these 3 things for part A, B, and C. So that's typically what you will see for questions 1, 3, and 4. You're going to have a part A, a part B, maybe even a part C. You will be given the method headers. All right, so you don't have to worry about the headers. So when you write your solution, you can just go ahead and write your code on the piece of paper. You do not have to write the method headers. You might want to, just so you keep track of everything, all of your variable names and what you're doing, but the method headers are not necessary. And please don't think that you can change the method headers to be something that would be more convenient to you. Don't try change the name of the method. Don't try to change the names of or types of parameters or numbers of parameters. You need to make sure that you use exactly what is given to you. So here, I have my method header for part A, my method header for part B, and for part C. So here is the solution for part A. I have to instantiate my 2-dimensional array. Coin box equals new coin rows columns, because if I look back, all I was given here is just that I'm going to have a 2-dimensional array. I can't do anything with it until I instantiate it. So you have to remember to instantiate it. So that must be that first line of your constructor, the instantiation. Coin box equals new coin, and then the number and rows and columns are passed in as a parameter. And then you're going to go through typical 2-dimensional array processing, go through your row, go through your columns, and you're going to instantiate a new coin object and put that coin object into the position in the 2-dimensional array. So that's what part A is asking us to do. It's to put new coins in every element of that 2D array. Part B, what I want to do is I want to take my array list and I want to take each element and put it into a position in the 2-dimensional array, but I want to make sure that I do it by columns. I want to process it by columns. So here, this solution starts our count at 0, our rows and column at 0s, and as long as I still have elements in my array list, I'm going to get that particular element, put it into the 2-dimensional array, and then I have to now take into consideration what row and what column I'm at, and I have to make my adjustments as necessary. And an important thing is, because this is not a void method, you want to make sure that you return that 2-dimensional array coin box, right? So here are some tips for 2-dimensional array problems in general. Again, like we did for question number 2, the question number 1 that we just saw, which was free response 2, make sure your instance variables, take a look at what those instance variables are, and you're probably going to be using them throughout your solution for part A, B, and C, right? You're also going to be using your parameters that are in your method headers. And if you need to use local variables like we did here, make sure that you declare them. And if they need to be initialized, which most likely they do, make sure you initialize them to whatever that value is. So here, because they're integers, I want to make sure I initialize them to 0, because I'm keeping a count, not because they're integers, but because I'm keeping a count. So if you have variables, you've got your private instance variables to use, you've got your parameters to use, and whatever ones that you use yourself are there also. As I said, objects have to be instantiated before you use them. So you have to make sure you use, whatever your object is called equals new, whatever the class is. With the 2-dimensional arrays, you have to be prepared to do traversal multiple different ways, right? So when you have traversal, you're most likely going to have a nested loop, one loop going through the rows, one loop going through the columns. Make sure that you use the correct bounds. The bounds are most likely start at 0 and go to less than whatever the lengths are. Make sure that you know how to traverse and 2D array in row major order. So you know to go across, just like we read, or you have to traverse it in backwards, right? Go from the bottom row all the way up to the top. Know how to traverse in column major. That means go down the first column, go down the second column, go down the third column, or backwards to front. Or what we call, I don't know who we is, but it's me and some of my friends call serpentine, where it's kind of like a snake where you go over and then you come back and then you go over and you come back just like a snake. Or you can go up and down, down and up, just back and forth. So you want to make sure that you can do traversals any of those ways, and that you know how to traverse the diagonals of a 2-dimensional array, whether in row major order. Well, that's kind of backwards. Can't do it backwards, but you want to go in the major axis or the minor diagonal, major diagonal or minor diagonal. So this is some of the common things that are seen on the 2-dimensional array questions, which are typically number 4. And here is the solution to part C. Here, because I'm returning an array list, I'm going to instantiate an array list that I'm going to use throughout my solution. And then I'm going to just go ahead and traverse it as I need to. So I'm going to take my type 1 to 6, and then I'm going to go through my traversal. It's column major. The columns are from 0 to the end. The rows are from 0 to the end. If what is in that 2-dimensional array matches what I'm looking for, so at first I'm looking for 1, then I'll be looking for 2, etc., I'm going to go ahead and add that to my array list that I'm building. And then when I'm finally done, I'm going to return that array list. So again, make sure you have the instantiation. If your method has a return type, if it's not a void, you want to make sure that you declare a variable, initialize the variable, and give that variable some value and send it back at the end. That's the typical. I mean, not saying it's going to happen every time, but make sure that that's probably what it is going to be. Make sure that you know how to use the names, make sure you know how to use the methods that are in the class. So for example, if I want to, I'm in my 2-dimensional array, which is full of coin. My coin has, I believe, 3 methods. One of them is called get coin type. So make sure you know the names of the methods that are there, how to call them, and if they have parameters, how to pass the proper parameters, and know that what the return type is. Okay. So someone's asking a question about the free response questions, which I'll get to in a moment. So again, typical things to expect with a 2-dimensional array. All right, so here are some of the unfortunate penalties that you can get in writing your solution to the free response questions. With arrays and array lists, you have to make sure that you're accessing them and using them correctly. So when you have an array, you use the square brackets. When you have an array list, you use the .get. Sometimes students in their solution, they reverse it. So if something is declared as an array list, they'll use square brackets. Well, if that occurs, that student will receive a 1-point penalty. Extra code that causes a side effect. The most popular thing that the students do to get this penalty, unfortunately, is they do a system.out.print. Please don't do any system.out.prints in your free response solution unless you see the question asking you to print something out. I think there's only been one question that I've seen that has said to print something out. So it's not likely to happen. But again, I don't know what the 2022 and beyond exams will look like, but it's a pretty good guess that you don't want to print anything. So anything that you do extra that causes something bad to happen, you will get a point penalty. Now, going back to that question before, if you have accessors and you have mutators that you write in your class design, and they're not called, that's perfectly fine. You will not be assessed a penalty. Local variables are used, but none are declared. So in writing your solution to question 3, at no point do you ever declare local variables. You will receive a point penalty. If you have 4 local variables and you forget to do one of them, that's not penalized. It's if you don't do it at all. What that is saying is you, the student, probably don't know that you're supposed to declare, or, hey, you've got 22.5 minutes to write the solution, you forgot to do it. So you will get incurred a 1-point penalty for that particular question. Destruction of persistent data. So changing a value referenced by a parameter. So if you have an array that is passed as a parameter to a method, and inside that method, you make changes to the array or array list, and you weren't supposed to, you will receive a penalty. And if you have a method that is supposed to be void and you return something, return false or return done or return something, and it's not supposed to, you will receive a penalty. Keep in mind that each question 1 is graded separately, then question 2, then question 3, and then question 4. They're all graded separately. So if you do these things 4 times, if on every single one of your responses you write system.out.print done, you're going to get 4 points out of the 36 taken off. So please don't do that. All right, so here's
Debbie,
the example.
Just a real quick time check. We're at exactly 5 o'clock.
I know.
So we've got 30 minutes left.
I
don't know. Yeah, I know that you've been answering a lot of the questions as we go through, so that's probably a little bit of a time saver, but just wanted to throw that out there. Good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. So the AP exam schedule, as you know, computer science is the first week of exams. It is in the afternoon at 12 o'clock or very close to 12 o'clock, depending on what time your school schedules it. But we have, as of this week, 6 weeks before the exam. So we're getting there. It's exciting. It's exciting time. I just got goosebumps. I'm so excited. Seriously, goosebumps. So 4 weeks before the exam, what you should be doing is taking some practice exams. The book has 2 practice exams that you can take, multiple choice, free response. It has the solutions. It has the solutions explained. So you should definitely take some type of practice exam before the about 4 weeks before your actual AP exam. Review material that you're not confident about. The book will tell you, or when you take the exams, you'll know what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. Focus in right now on those weaknesses and make them turn them into strengths. Whereas 2 weeks before the exam, you want to do some last minute reviewing. Those topics that you are strong with, make sure that you continue to be strong with, right? You don't want to lose some of that as time gets closer. Since this exam is handwritten on paper, please practice writing legibly as best you can. I know me especially, I'm very sloppy at writing because I don't write a lot, right? I'm doing typing almost all the time. I'm out of practice at handwriting or printing, which is pretty sad, but please practice writing legibly because it'll make it a lot easier for us, the reader, to be able to see what it is that you're doing and write it large enough. Become familiar with if you haven't already, become familiar with this Java Quick Reference. This Java Quick Reference sheet will be given to you while you're taking the free response part of the exam, as well as the multiple choice part of the exam. So be familiar with it. The night before, you want to relax, have a good night's sleep. Don't worry about it. You've practiced, you're prepared all school year long. You're ready to take this exam. You're going to do good. It's just your turn to shine. Make sure that you shine that day. So get a good night's sleep and relax. Some strategies that are in the book that are common sense strategies for taking any type of exam. The day of the exam, eat a good breakfast, have a good lunch. If your school permits, you will have a break between taking the multiple choice 90 minutes and taking the free response 90 minutes. So within that time, if your school allows you to have a snack just to get those jitterbugs out, then go ahead and take a snack, unless that'll make it worse. The computer science exam is one of the exams for the free response that you need to use a pencil. Most other exams are in pen, but computer science free response is using a pencil. So make sure you have a number 2 pencil. Make sure you have a pen with you because you're going to have to fill out your booklet and stuff with a pen. I would assume your school is going to ask you for a photo ID to make sure that you are the person that is taking the exam. And I would also bring a watch, a regular watch, just to keep track of your time if there's no clock in your school, in your wherever you're taking the exam. So the multiple choice, write in the book, write all you want in the book, cross things out, trace your code, because you don't want to make any mental mistakes. So use that paper, write it down. You cannot bring in any extra paper or reference materials, nothing. The only thing you can bring to the exam are those things on the list. Eliminate answer choices. You have A, B, C, D, E. You don't have any penalty for guessing. So cross out the things that you know aren't going to work and go ahead and answer the ones that, or take a guess at the ones that you think it could be. You have 90 minutes, 40 questions. That's about 2.5 minutes per question. And again, you'll have the Java Quick reference with you. The link is going to be at the bottom of the PowerPoint. The free response. So this is what the free response paper will look like, or very similar to this. You're just going to have a blank piece of paper and you're going to be writing your solution in that blank part. Please, please, please make sure at the top you bubble that you're answering question 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Make sure you bubble the question you're going to do, right? Don't leave it blank, because I don't know what's going to happen if you leave it blank, right? You want to make sure if you're answering question 1, put a bubble right, or color in the bubble right here and answer question 1. If you need another page, fill in bubble for question 1, write the rest of the response. Another page, bubble question 1, write the rest of the response. So in most cases, as I said, you might have to do a part A, a part B, and a part C. You can put all of them on 1 page, put them on 2 pages, put them on 3 pages, whatever floats your boat, whatever works for you. You should have plenty of pages, but don't put any 2 questions together. No, no, no. Don't do part of question 1 here and then start question 2. Do not do that. As I said, write neatly, 22.5 minutes per question. Pay attention to your variable names that are in the header and as an instance variable. If it's a void, don't use a return. If it does have a return, make sure you return something. If you're revising your answer, whatever you wrote down, you want to take it away. Instead of taking the time to erase it, just put a big X through it, cross it out. Don't take the time to erase it, number 1. And number 2, because it's on pencil and it's going to get scanned, there's a chance that if you don't erase it completely, that erasure will be picked up in the scanner. So it's really just the best advice to just put a big X through that, what you don't want them to be graded. Don't worry, and you can even do arrows. Put an arrow, big X. If you forgot to put a line of code, put an arrow up pointing to where you want this new part of code to go. Don't write any comments. Don't take the time to write comments. And credit will be awarded for each part of the question that you answer correctly. Okay, so all these strategies are common strategies that are out there. So what I want to do is, here is the breakdown of all of the questions, the percentage, and your teacher knows this and you should know this also. This is the breakdown of the different 10 units that are in the course, as well as the breakdown of multiple choice and free response. So the question was asked before, yes, they will always. So free response question number 1 will just be relating to units 1, 2, 3, and 4. There will not be any arrays or array lists or 2D or anything in question number 1. Question number 1 is just meant to see, can you write your Booleans? Can you write your methods? Type of a question. Question 2 will always be class design, or it might be an inherited class design from unit 9. Unit 3 will always be an array question, an array list question, or a combination of the 2. And question 4 will always be a 2 array, which might also include a regular array. So this is how the units are broken down. And they will always be in that order, question 1, 2, 3, 4. And how you answer them You don't have to answer them in question 1, 2, 3, 4 order. You can answer them in any order that you want. All right, some problems from the book. So I want to go through, I'm not going to have time to go through all of these, but I picked out certain questions in the diagnostic exam so that I can bring up some certain points for you. I don't have anything to show you in Unit 1 because Unit 1 is just primitive types and that's just the foundation of everything. So I'll start with Unit number 2. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I'm going to time you, and then there'll be a poll. And you can just click on what your answer is. So 2 minutes. So go ahead and answer the poll. All right, 10 more seconds. You can click on choice A, B, C, D, E. Take a guess. If you're not sure, because you have to answer every question. Otherwise, you're definitely not getting a point if you don't answer it. All right, let's see the results.
It's like choice D.
Choice D, let's see, what was the answer? Yes, it was choice D. Very good, very good. Half of you got that. So something I want to bring up about this type of question is, remember, you have the Java quick reference with you. So the random is one of those methods from the math class that you have to be familiar with, along with absolute value, the power, and the square root. Random returns a number greater than or equal to 0, but less than 1. So make sure you understand that. So this is a typical way to assess, do the students know how to, or do you know how to use the random number generator properly? Here it's being multiplied by 21, which will now give us a number between 0 and 20. And then if I add 13 to it, it gives us a number between 13 and 33. I think I misspoke one of those numbers. But anyway, the answer is D, a number between 13 and 33. So use that quick reference. It appears frequently on not only the multiple choice, but also the free response. So question number 2, let me give you 90 seconds. Right, about 10 more seconds. Again, for the real exam, you'll have about 2.5 minutes. You know, some questions will take you longer than others. But it's good to have it, you know, split equally. All right, let's see what the responses, how they came out. Oh, look at that.
Wow.
Nice.
I hope it's
100%
right.
of you. It is. It is. So this is a typical question, you know, right? Just declaring variables, doing a conditional, making sure that you understand the how the conditionals work with the and, the or. So here, the purpose of this is my recommendation is to know the flow of the if statements, as well as nested if statements, which this is. Understand the Boolean operators of not, and or, and their order of operations, which not comes first, then is the and, then is the or. And of course, that's if there's no parentheses. If there are parentheses, then the parentheses take precedence. De Morgan's law. This didn't apply in this particular instance, but you want to make sure that you're familiar with De Morgan's law. And the short circuit evaluation, meaning if something in for here with the end, if this had come out to be false, short circuit evaluation says I don't need to check this second part. All right, let me go down and I'll skip through these real quick since we're running low on time. Don't look at the answers if we go back. So you can look through this. Oh, I guess that was it. Final thoughts? No final thoughts. So questions and answers. There have been a lot of questions and answers, and I've answered them as we go. So I don't know. So if there's other questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, we can continue with this. Just want to give you some tips on how to answer some of the multiple choice questions and bring up some of these topics. So it's up to you. If you have questions.
Looks like you addressed most or all of them, Debbie.
I did all of them.
That was great. So unless anyone has anything further, maybe we just do a couple more multiple choice at your discretion.
Okay, keep going. But if you have a question, I'll answer it as best I can, at least. So here's something from Unit 4, iteration. So this is a typical question. So here is some code. Here's code 1, code 2, code 3. And the question will be something like, you know, is it 1 only, 2 only, 3 only, 1 is 2? So some of those questions. So you'll see this frequently. So I will give you 90 seconds, which again is not enough time, but we can make a good guess. All right, 10 more seconds. All right, let's see what the poll is. Majority said B. And that, my friends, was the answer, 2 only. So what I'd like to point out with these types of questions is iterations. Typically the iterations that we do, because we work through arrays or any other time, we typically start at 0 and we use the less than comparison and we increment by 1. But we don't have to do that. You can see that in this example. It's not starting at 0. It's not using less than. There's all types of iterations. So be prepared for those types of iterations. Make sure you look at the boundaries very carefully. Sometimes the problem is not correct because it's using an equals or it's not using an equals. So make sure that you understand the difference. And for items with choices of 1, 2, and 3, if you can eliminate one of them, then that might be a way that you can eliminate a multiple choice option. All right, question 7, I'm not going to take, I don't have much time, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it be here. And if you're looking at the recording, you can pause the recording, give yourself 2.5 minutes to answer the question, and then see what my tips are. So here for question number 7 real quick. So pause it. So here we have a class and I'm being asked what compiles without error. The answer for this one is C. So you have to be careful. You cannot access, and we talked about that in my first example tonight or today. You cannot access private instance variables outside of the class, and that's exactly what it's doing in choice A. Park.acres, I don't have access to that because my acres is private. So be very careful about some of those things. Pay attention to the presence or absence of parameters. Here, the get acres, this was not correct because get acres was not written with any parameters, whereas I'm calling it here with parameters. So you just have to be careful of things like that. An example from Unit 6, array. So I'll give you a moment. You can pause it, take your 2.5 minutes to answer it. And I'll come back and say the answer is C. So my tips here, when you're doing an array, along with all those other things with the iteration, it's a good idea to draw your array in your booklet, right? Give it the values, put your little elements, your indices above it or whatever you do. So drawing, because tracing is much easier. Know that element n and n-1 are adjacent. They're right next to, they're adjacent elements, as well as n and n+1. So that's something that's commonly done in the multiple choice, as well as sometimes the free response wants you to access adjacent elements. Notice the loop bounds. Notice the bounds started at 1 and went to length -1. That's because of those adjacent items. And as I said with the 2D, make sure that you can traverse either, the most common way from the beginning to the end, but also know how to traverse from the end to the beginning or skip every other or something like that. Question 7, array list. So if you want to pause it, if this is the recording, pause it. And then come back with the answer. The answer for this one is A. Don't forget you have this Java quick reference, so make use of it for the multiple choice and the free response. It has the list of all of the methods. We know that the array list has many methods with it, but these are the only ones that are required for the AP exam. So these are the only ones that you will see as a multiple choice part, but in the free response, these are the only ones that are needed to answer a free response question. But if you use some of the methods that are not on the quick reference for the free response, as long as you do it correctly and you have not been told in the free response question, you will not receive credit if you use such and such, then you are perfectly fine to use whatever works. Okay, so you can go off of the subset in the free response. As long as you do it correctly, you won't be penalized, and they don't have that little note. But no, in the multiple choice, you're not going to see anything that is not, you're only going to see things that are in the subset. know the difference between the two add methods. And again, in your booklet, trace your code. All right, the next question. I'm going to pause it on recording. And then the answer is E. This is a two-dimensional array traversal. Again, like I said before, make sure that you know how to traverse different ways. In row major, where you're going along the rows, column major, where you're going along the columns, the serpentine, back and forth, or the diagonals. The main diagonal is the top left to bottom right, which to me is this, but to you, I think it's this way. And then the minor diagonal is the other way. Inheritance. This is a question from Unit 9. So if you want to pause. And then I'll come back with the answer. The answer is C. So my suggestion for the inheritance problems, if you need to, draw one of the diagrams that shows the inheritance, shows all the different relationships that they have. Also, it wasn't part of this question, but what will not compile is if you were to do dwarf planet Eris equals new planet, because you cannot go in that direction. But you could do dwarf planet make equals new dwarf planet. Something like that will compile. And these are real names of the dwarf planets, just so you know. We all know about Pluto, but I'm sure we don't all know about the other ones. At least I didn't. I'll admit it. And the last question that I wanted to go over is a recursion. So for the recursion, you will only be asked to look at recursion on a multiple choice. You will not have a recursion question as a free response. That doesn't mean if you choose to write your solution recursively on a free response that you won't get credit. That's not what I'm saying. If you write a recursive solution and it's correct for a free response, then you will get credit. But you're not, you will not be asked to write something specifically recursively on the free response questions. Only appear as a multiple choice. So this particular question, the answer is D. So here for the recursion, make sure you write in the booklet to trace your code, because again, you can make some mental mistakes, possibly. I'm not saying that you will. And also make sure that you know how the div and the mod operators work, the percent for the modulus and the division for integers. All right, so go to the last slide. If you have any questions specifically, especially for teachers, if I've said something that you think you may not have been correct, please send me an email and I'll clarify something if I've said it incorrectly or it's been hard to understand. This is the website that I'll let Mr. O'Sullivan continue with that, but there's one question.
Thank you. I did notice that at least, I think it was Myra asked to repost the link. This is the link here where the recording will live as of hopefully by tomorrow, but definitely soon. Pardon me. If you guys want to take a picture of that with your phone or write it down or really quickly. I think we can all agree this was a tremendously valuable 90 minutes. Thank you, Debbie. You did a really, really amazing job here. So please do feel free to.
Without seeing anybody.
Yeah, awkward, right?
Yeah.
That's why I tried to stay on camera, but I mean, and you got to look at this the whole time. You know, please do recommend to your students that they go in and watch this recording. Couple last minute things. Just thank you to Anya and Simone, who are on our team here, who did a lot of work behind the scenes. Just a reminder to everybody, this is the first in what we hope will be a series of these things. So hopefully this will be the first of the Computer Science A webinars we do for the future. But also this coming couple of weeks, we have 7 more subjects. So tell your fellow teachers that there's plenty more of these to come. This was the first one. It'll be hard to live up to this one, I'll be honest. But spread the word. We've got 7 more 90-minute sessions coming at you. And in the future, we'll hope to do another one, or at least another 1 or 2 for Computer Science A. Reminder, all this stuff that Debbie's created for you is in the book. You know, we're in prime season for pre-test prep. So 5 Steps to a 5 Computer Science A, this is where it all is. So, you know, I think that's considered a shameless plug. And I think that's all.
So if you have a question, you know, feel free to email me at any time.
And thank you again, Debbie. Really excellent job. I can't thank you enough.
You ready to take the exam now? You have
I
6
think
weeks.
listen, I've learned a lot. I think I could probably get that maybe a 2 at this point,
Okay,
but I could work it up.
that's commendable.
Anything else? Any other last final questions before we adjourn?
No, good luck to everyone. Good luck on the
Yeah.
exam. Yeah, do legibly, write legibly, bubble
That's
that
right.
answer. Question 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure you do that bubble.
Don't forget.
Answer all the multiple choice questions. Relax the night before. Just chill out. Not too much. But good luck, especially with those that have multiple exams.
All right. We're going to call it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time. Take care. Good luck.
Bye.
Bye-bye.